The morning after my retirement party, my wife moved $187,000 out of our joint savings account before I even finished my first cup of coffee. I was standing barefoot in our kitchen in Naperville, Illinois, wearing the robe she had bought me for Christmas, staring at the bank alert on my phone while Linda calmly buttered a slice of sourdough toast like nothing had happened. 30 years of marriage sat between us at that kitchen island. 30 years of birthdays, hospital visits, mortgages, company Christmas parties, silent dinners, and late-night flights I took because work always seemed more urgent than home. I looked at the woman I had kissed goodnight for half my life, and for the first time, I could not tell whether she was my wife or the most patient investor I had ever met. Then she looked up at me, smiled without warmth, and asked, "Did you sleep well?" I did not answer right away, because the number on my screen had the strange power to make the whole room tilt. The granite counters, the stainless steel refrigerator, the framed family photos in the hallway, the expensive espresso machine I barely knew how to use. All of it suddenly looked like evidence from a life I had funded but never really entered. Linda had been beautiful when I married her at 26, with soft brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a laugh that made strangers turn around in restaurants. At 55, she was still beautiful, but there was a carefulness to her now, a polished silence, like every feeling had been folded, boxed, and stored somewhere I had never been allowed to see. "Linda," I said, holding up my phone, "why did almost 200 grand just leave our savings account?" Her knife paused over the toast for half a second, not long enough for most husbands to notice, but long enough for a retired man with nothing left to do but notice everything. "That's for taxes," she said. "Taxes go to the IRS," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Not to an account at Harbor State Bank under a name I don't recognize." She set the knife down, wiped her fingers on a cloth napkin, and gave me the kind of look she used to give waiters who brought the wrong wine at charity dinners. "Mark, you handled the business for 30 years, and I handled the house. Don't start acting like you suddenly need to approve every detail." That sentence landed harder than it should have, because it was true enough to hurt and false enough to scare me. I had built Whitaker Industrial Supply from 3 rented shelves in a Joliet warehouse into a company with 4 locations and 120 employees. I had missed school plays, canceled vacations, answered calls during anniversaries, and told myself every sacrifice was love wearing work boots. I thought money was the language I spoke fluently for my family, but standing there in my own kitchen, I realized Linda may have been listening to a completely different conversation. The night before, at my retirement party at the Riverwalk Grand Ballroom, she had stood beside me in a navy dress while everyone clapped for the man who finally made it. My son, Ethan, toasted me with a joke about my laptop being my 3rd child, and my daughter, Grace, cried when she said she hoped I would finally learn how to sit still. Linda raised her champagne glass last, her diamond bracelet flashing under the chandelier, and said, "Mark always knew how to provide. Not love, not protect, not show up. Provide." At the time, people laughed and clapped, and I smiled like a fool because I thought she was proud of me. Now, with the bank alert burning in my hand, that word sounded like a verdict. I walked into my study after breakfast, the room where I had spent more nights with spreadsheets than with my wife, and opened the financial cabinet built into the wall. The folders were exactly where they had always been, labeled in Linda's neat handwriting: mortgage, insurance, taxes, estate, retirement. For years, I had trusted those labels the way tired men trust the floor beneath their feet, because checking everything felt like accusing the woman who had raised my children. But retirement does something cruel to a man who has spent his whole life running. It removes the noise. It leaves only the questions. Behind the folder marked home repairs, I found a thin envelope I had never seen before. Inside were photocopies of cashier's checks, each one written from our household account over the past 9 years. 10,000 here, 7,000 there, 12,000 in April, 15,000 right before Christmas. The memo lines were blank, but the recipient was always the same: Eleanor Ridge Holdings, LLC. I sat down slowly in my leather chair, the one Linda had given me when I turned 50, and felt an odd numbness move through my arms. I knew plenty of holding companies. I had used them, negotiated with them, cursed at them during acquisitions. But I did not know this one, and I did not like the fact that my wife had been feeding it money while I had been too busy being successful to ask why. When Linda appeared in the doorway, she did not look surprised to see the envelope in my hand. "You weren't supposed to find that today," she said. "Not ever. Not at all. Today." That was when I understood something had been scheduled around my retirement long before I retired. For the first week of retirement, I learned that my house had a rhythm that did not include me. Linda woke at 6, fed the golden retriever, opened the blinds in the sunroom, took a phone call in the laundry room, and left by 8:30 wearing perfume I could not remember buying. She did not ask me to come along. She did not ask what I planned to do. She moved around me with the quiet efficiency of someone navigating furniture that had recently been delivered and not yet placed. On Tuesday morning, I followed her schedule without following her car because I still wanted to believe I was a husband, not a detective. She said she was going to Pilates in downtown Naperville, then lunch with her friend Marcy, then the dry cleaner. Normal things. Wife things. Things that made me feel ashamed for doubting her. But when I called the Pilates studio from my study, pretending to ask about class times, the woman at the desk cheerfully told me Linda Whitaker had canceled her membership 18 months earlier. I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking at the retirement gifts on my desk. A silver clock, a framed photo from the warehouse team, a stupid mug that said, "Goodbye tension, hello pension." The mug made me want to throw it against the wall. That afternoon, I drove to the strip mall where she said she had gone for dry cleaning. Her Mercedes was not there. I waited 20 minutes anyway, watching people carry shirts in plastic sleeves across the parking lot, and I felt ridiculous until the bank app buzzed again. Another transfer. This one was $24,000. Eleanor Ridge Holdings, LLC. I called our accountant, Paul Fenton, a careful man with rimless glasses and the emotional range of a stapler. He had handled my corporate books for years, but Linda managed most of the household files because she enjoyed order and I enjoyed not thinking about anything after 10 at night. "Paul," I said, "what do you know about Eleanor Ridge Holdings?" There was a silence, then a paper shuffling sound that felt staged. "That's not something I can discuss without Linda present." My chest tightened. "You work for me. I work for both of you," he said carefully. That was the first time money made me feel poor. I hung up and went upstairs to our bedroom. Linda's side of the closet smelled faintly of lavender and expensive wool. Her clothes hung by color, winter whites, soft grays, blacks, blues, each garment spaced evenly as though she had built a museum exhibit titled "The Wife of a Successful Man." I checked drawers, shoe boxes, old purses. I found nothing until I opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, the one where she kept quilts from her mother and baby blankets from when Ethan and Grace were small. Under a folded blue blanket, I found a burner phone. It was not some cheap cracked thing bought from a gas station. It was a clean black smartphone with no case, no fingerprints, and a passcode I did not know. The battery was dead, which somehow made it worse, because dead secrets feel older than living ones. I plugged it into the wall behind the dresser and sat on the edge of our bed while the screen slowly woke up. For missed calls from a number saved as ER. Free messages. The newest one had arrived the night of my retirement party. "Is he calm today?" I read that sentence 5 times before it made sense and still could not make it harmless. It did not say, "Did he enjoy the party?" It did not say, "Does Mark know?" It asked whether I was calm, like I was a storm they had been watching on radar. The next message said, "We need the final numbers before the filing." The oldest said, "Linda, 30 years is enough. You did your part." I put the phone back exactly where I found it, because some instinct told me that if she knew I had seen it, the truth would disappear behind lawyers and locked passwords before I could understand it. Then I went downstairs and sat in the living room where Linda had chosen every pillow, every lamp, every framed print, and I tried to remember the last time she had touched me without needing something. There had been kisses, of course, quick ones by the garage door, polite ones before dinner parties, automatic ones at airports when I left for Dallas, Phoenix, Cincinnati, wherever the company needed saving. But the last real touch, the kind that says "I choose you even when nothing is required," was harder to find. I dug through years like a man searching a drawer for a missing key and found only receipts, obligations, and photographs where we stood close enough to look married. When Linda came home at 5:10, she carried a Nordstrom bag and smelled like rain, though it had not rained in Naperville all day. "How was Pilates?" I asked. She looked at me while removing one pearl earring, and again I saw that tiny pause. Fine. Marcy doing okay? She's Marcy, Linda said, turning toward the stairs. You know how she is. I did not know how Marcy was, because Marcy had moved to Scottsdale 3 years earlier after her divorce, and Linda had forgotten that she told me during a dinner I barely listened to. A week earlier, I might have missed the lie. A month earlier, I would have been on a conference call while she said it. 10 years earlier, I would have told myself marriage meant trusting the parts you were too tired to inspect. But now I was retired, and my wife had no idea how dangerous an unemployed husband could become when all he had left was time. I decided to find out whether Linda loved me by removing the one thing I was afraid she loved more. It was not noble, and I am not proud of it. But suspicion does not ask permission before it changes a man. On Thursday morning, I put on the gray suit I used to wear for bank meetings, drove downtown, and asked my attorney, Rachel Kim, to draft a letter that made it appear my buyout from Whitaker Industrial Supply was being challenged by a minority partner. The money was safe, but the story was simple enough to hurt. Lawsuit, frozen accounts, possible clawback, retirement funds at risk. Rachel leaned back in her chair and studied me over the top of the paper. Mark, testing your wife with fake financial disaster is a terrible idea. I know. Then why are you doing it? I looked out her window at Chicago traffic crawling between glass towers and felt embarrassed by the truth. Because after 30 years, I don't know any other way to ask if she would stay. Rachel's face softened, but not enough to approve. Sometimes the answer you get from a trap tells you as much about the trap as it does about the person inside it. I took the letter anyway. That evening, I waited until Linda poured herself a glass of Chardonnay and sat at the kitchen island with her iPad. The old version of me would have softened the room first, would have talked around the problem, would have promised I could fix it before she had time to be scared. But the new version of me, the retired version with too much silence in his chest, placed the letter beside her wine and watched her read it. Her face changed slowly. Not panic, not concern for me. Calculation. I could see numbers moving behind her eyes like slot machines. How bad is this? She asked. I don't know yet. Could we lose the house? We might have to downsize. She looked toward the sunroom, then the staircase, then the wall where our children's portraits hung in matching frames. What about the lake property? We never bought lake property, I said. Her hand froze around the wine glass. It was small, but it was enough. What lake property, Linda? She set the glass down with too much care. I meant hypothetically, Mark. Don't twist my words because you're upset. That night, she did not come to bed until after midnight. I lay there pretending to sleep while she moved through the room like a thief in soft slippers. A drawer opened. A zipper whispered. Paper slid against paper. Then she went into the bathroom, turned on the fan, and made a phone call. Her voice was low, but our bathroom door had never closed properly because I had promised to fix the hinge in 2018 and never did. He says the money could be frozen, she whispered. I heard a man answer, but not his words. No, I don't think he knows about the house, she said. But he asked about lake property. My heart beat so hard I thought the mattress might move. Then she said the sentence that ended the life I thought I had built. I waited this long because you told me not to rush, but I am not losing my exit because Mark suddenly decided to retire and look around. My exit. I stared at the ceiling fan turning above me and remembered every time I had called from an airport hotel to say I would be home late. Every time she had said, it's fine. Every time she had set aside dinner, smiled at a client, hosted Thanksgiving, bought my mother flowers, signed Christmas cards from both of us, and slept beside me with an escape plan quietly gathering interest. The next morning, while Linda showered, I checked her purse. I found a key with a plastic tag that said Unit 42. No company name, just a barcode. I photographed it, put it back, and drove around Naperville until I found a storage facility on Ogden Avenue where the gate scanner matched the style of the tag. The manager was a college kid with acne and earbuds who barely looked up when I said my wife forgot something in our unit. Money had trained me to sound confident, and confidence opened more doors than honesty ever did. Unit 42 smelled like cardboard, dust, and secrets that had been packed carefully. Inside were plastic bins labeled with dates, boxes of dishes I had never seen, winter coats, framed art, a second set of Christmas ornaments, and a stack of furniture wrapped in moving blankets. Against the back wall stood 6 wardrobe boxes, each labeled in black marker. Savannah House. Not Lake Geneva. Not Chicago. Savannah. I opened the nearest bin and found photographs of a cream-colored house with green shutters, a porch swing, and Spanish moss hanging from live oaks in the yard. There were contractor invoices, paint samples, utility bills, and a deed transfer packet listing the owner as Eleanor Ridge Holdings LLC. The registered agent was Linda and Whitaker, using her maiden name as a middle initial I had not seen on any document since our wedding license. At the bottom of the bin was a folder marked after filing. Inside were divorce papers. They had been drafted 11 years earlier. My name was typed beside hers like a business partner being removed from an agreement, and attached to the back was a spreadsheet calculating the best time for Linda to leave based on my retirement payout, pension options, property values, tax consequences, and projected spousal support. Some cells were highlighted yellow. One note, written in Linda's hand, said, "Do not file before Mark retires. Final value matters." I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit, surrounded by the future my wife had built without me, and I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because grief sometimes comes out wearing the wrong face. The main shock did not happen when I found the divorce papers. It happened when I saw the photograph taped inside the folder, because Linda was not standing alone in front of the Savannah house. She was standing beside a man I had not seen in 32 years, and his arm was around her waist in the comfortable way of someone who did not need permission anymore. His name was David Keller, and before Linda became my wife, he had been the man her father hated, the man with no money, no plans, and a smile that made her reckless. I remembered him because at our wedding reception, after everyone was drunk on champagne and relief, Linda's older sister pulled me aside and said, "You won, Mark, so don't spend your life acting like you're still competing with a ghost." I laughed then, because I was 26, ambitious, and stupid enough to believe winning a woman meant keeping her heart by default. On Saturday, I drove to the address listed on the Savannah utility bill, not because I had a plan, but because sometimes a man needs to see the knife before he can believe he is bleeding. I left Illinois before dawn and stopped once in Kentucky for gas, once outside Atlanta for coffee, and reached Savannah after dark, exhausted enough to feel unreal. The house was exactly like the photos: cream siding, green shutters, warm porch lights, and a swing moving gently in the humid Georgia night. Linda's Mercedes sat in the driveway. She had told me she was visiting Grace in Milwaukee. I parked half a block away under an oak tree and watched my wife through the front window. She moved around the kitchen barefoot, wearing jeans and one of my old Northwestern sweatshirts, the one I thought she had donated years ago. David Keller stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan, gray-haired now, leaner than I remembered, still carrying that easy looseness I had never had. Linda laughed at something he said, not the polite dinner party laugh I knew, not the thin social laugh she used when one of my suppliers told a bad joke, but a real laugh that opened her whole face. It was like watching a stranger wear my wife's body. I got out of the car before I could stop myself. My legs felt hollow as I crossed the street, climbed the porch steps, and rang the doorbell. Through the glass, I saw Linda turn. The laugh vanished. David looked toward the door, then toward her, and in that brief exchange I saw history move between them like a private language. Linda opened the door without speaking. For a moment, the three of us stood there with cicadas screaming in the trees and my 30-year marriage breathing its last warm breath between us. "Mark," she said, "you shouldn't be here." That almost broke me more than an apology would have. Not "I'm sorry." Not "let me explain." "You shouldn't be here." As though I had walked into the wrong room. David stepped forward. "Maybe we should all sit down." I looked at him and smiled, because anger can make a man polite in a way that scares even himself. "David, if you say one more word in my wife's house, or your house, or whatever this is, I promise you'll remember exactly why her father didn't like you." Linda's voice snapped. Don't threaten him. There it was. Protection. Quick. Instinctive. Fierce. The kind of loyalty I had been starving for while sitting across from her at restaurants that charged $200 for silence. I walked past her into the living room. The house was not extravagant, and somehow that made it worse. It was warm. Lived in. There were books on the coffee table, a half-finished puzzle, a blue ceramic bowl filled with keys and sunglasses, a framed watercolor of the marsh, and on the mantel, behind a small brass lamp, was a photo of Linda and David standing on a beach at sunrise. No children, no charity gala, no business dinner, just two people who looked like they had chosen peace. How long? I asked. Linda closed the door slowly. Mark, how long? David looked down, and that answered before she did. Not the whole marriage, Linda said. I laughed again, that terrible broken sound. That's supposed to comfort me? She wrapped her arms around herself. It started again 12 years ago. 12 years. I thought of that year immediately. The Phoenix expansion. My father's stroke. Grace leaving for college. Ethan getting his first apartment. Linda turning quiet. Me calling her dramatic. Me sleeping in airport hotels and telling myself she would understand because everything I did was for us. Was any of it real? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears, but tears are not always love. Sometimes they are just pressure leaving the body. At the beginning, yes, she said. I loved you at the beginning. At the beginning, I repeated. You were kind then, she said, and her voice shook. You were hungry, but you were kind. Then every year you got richer, and every year I got smaller inside that house. You provided everything except yourself. I wanted to hate her cleanly. I wanted betrayal to be simple, with her as the villain and me as the faithful husband. But simple stories are for people who were paying attention while the damage happened. So you built a secret life with my money, I said. Our money, she said, and there was the old steel in her face. 30 years of hosting your clients, raising your children, keeping your mother comfortable, making your life look whole while you treated home like a hotel with better furniture. And David? I asked. David finally spoke, quieter than I expected. I didn't come back for the money. No, I said, turning toward him. You just moved into the house it bought. Linda flinched, and for 1 second I was glad I had hurt her. Then I hated myself for needing that. On the coffee table sat a folder I recognized from the storage unit, except this one was new. I opened it before she could stop me. Inside was a fresh divorce petition, ready to file Monday morning, with a settlement proposal attached. She wanted the Savannah house, a cash distribution, half the retirement accounts, and no claim to my company's shares beyond what state law required. The numbers were cold, precise, and deeply familiar, because my wife had learned from the best business mind in her life how to calculate an exit. At the very back was one handwritten page. I gave Mark 30 years. I will not give him the rest. I looked at that sentence until the letters blurred. Then Linda said, I was going to tell you after the party. And that, somehow, was the final insult, because she had let me stand under chandeliers while people clapped for my success, knowing I was about to retire into an empty marriage that had already packed its bags. I flew back to Chicago the next morning because driving 12 hours with that much pain in my chest felt like a bad way to stay alive. Linda did not come with me. She said she needed a few days, as though I had discovered a scheduling conflict instead of a second life. I sat by the airplane window, watching clouds slide beneath us like torn white sheets, and tried to understand how a man could build warehouses, negotiate million-dollar contracts, pay off a mortgage early, send 2 kids through college, and still fail to notice that his wife had emotionally moved out before the furniture did. When I landed, Ethan was waiting near baggage claim. Linda had called him, of course. She had always known how to get ahead of a story. He looked older than 32 in that airport light, with my jaw and his mother's tired eyes. Dad, he said, what happened? I wanted to say your mother betrayed me. I wanted to say she stole from us, lied to me, used me, waited for my retirement payout like a hunter waiting for deer season. But he was our son, not my witness. She has a house in Savannah, I said, and David Keller is in it. Ethan closed his eyes. Not shocked enough. That was when a new wound opened. You knew something, I said. Not all of it, but something. He rubbed his face with both hands. Mom told me a few years ago she was unhappy. She said you weren't cruel, but you were gone even when you were home. I felt the words like gravel under my skin. So everybody knew my marriage was dying except me. Dad, you weren't exactly asking. That was not betrayal, but it hurt like betrayal because it was true. I had asked about quarterly numbers, college tuition, property taxes, transmission repairs, insurance renewals, and whether Linda needed anything from Costco. I had not asked whether she was lonely in a way money could not decorate. Grace came over that evening with groceries I did not want. She was 29, a school counselor in Milwaukee, and she cried as soon as she saw me standing in the foyer. I'm sorry, she said, and hugged me so hard I could feel the child she used to be. I'm so sorry. Did you know too? She pulled back, and her silence gave me the answer. Grace. She told me last year she might leave after you retired, she said. I told her to talk to you. She talked to a lawyer instead. Grace looked toward the staircase, toward the house where she had grown up, and her voice became small. Dad, when I was a kid, I used to wait at the front window when you said you'd be home for dinner. Mom would keep checking the oven, and every time your headlights didn't come around the corner, her face would change. After a while, she stopped cooking on nights you promised. There are accusations that make you defensive and accusations that make you see a room from 30 years ago. I saw Linda in that kitchen younger, hopeful, listening for the garage door. I saw myself in a hotel bar with a client, saying one more round, one more deal, one more year of pushing hard, and then I would slow down. I had been borrowing from my marriage like it was an account that never closed. Linda returned 3 days later with her lawyer's email already sent to Rachel. She walked into the house carrying one suitcase, not because she was staying, but because she wanted certain documents before the legal freeze took effect. I met her in the dining room, the room we used twice a year, and placed the old burner phone on the polished table between us. She looked at it, then at me. I know about Eleanor Ridge, I said. I know about Savannah. I know about David. I know about the divorce papers from 11 years ago. Her mouth tightened. Then you know enough. No, I said. I know facts. I don't know when my wife stopped being my wife. Linda sat down across from me. For the first time in years, she looked tired without trying to hide it. I stopped waiting for you around year 17, she said. I stopped being angry around year 20. I stopped believing you would notice around year 22. And you stayed for money. I stayed for the kids first, she said. Then for stability. Then because leaving felt harder than disappearing slowly. That's a beautiful way to say money. Her eyes flashed. Yes, Mark, the money mattered. The house mattered. The security mattered. Do you want me to pretend it didn't? You made money the center of our marriage, and now you're furious that I learned to survive inside the system you built. That sentence stripped something from me. I wanted to deny it, but the house itself argued against me. Every room had been my apology for being absent. New kitchen, new car, new patio, new jewelry, new trip I would join for 2 days before flying back early. I had mistaken spending for showing up, and Linda had mistaken comfort for love until comfort became the only thing left. Did you love David? I asked. She looked down at her hands. I loved how I felt when I wasn't waiting for you. It was the cruelest honest answer she could have given. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the backyard where Ethan and Grace had once chased fireflies while I took calls from suppliers. You could have told me. I did, she said quietly. Not with folders and lawyers, but I told you. You just kept saying, after this quarter. For a while, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, the old house settled. 30 years did not explode all at once. They collapsed slowly, beam by beam, until the dust made breathing difficult. Finally, Linda picked up the burner phone and put it in her purse. I'm filing, she said. I know. She walked to the doorway, then stopped. For what it's worth, Mark, I did not marry you for money. I looked at her, wanting to believe there was a clean piece of our past untouched by calculation. But you stayed for it, I said. She did not deny it. The divorce took 7 months, which is a strange amount of time for 30 years to become paperwork. Lawyers translated our marriage into assets, liabilities, retirement accounts, property values, and disputed transfers, as though love had been a poorly documented merger. Linda kept the Savannah house after returning part of the money she had moved without disclosure. I kept the Naperville house until it sold, and David Keller's name appeared nowhere important, which felt both legally irrelevant and spiritually obscene. The day we signed the final settlement, Linda wore a cream blouse and the pearl earrings I had bought her in Boston after missing our 22nd anniversary dinner. I noticed that because retirement had turned me into the kind of man who finally noticed everything too late. She signed first. Her hand did not shake. Mine did, just once, on the W in Whitaker, outside the lawyer's office. She stood beside the elevator and looked at me like someone studying an old photograph. I hope you find something real now, she said. I almost laughed. That's a generous thing to say after hiding a boyfriend and a house. He wasn't my boyfriend, she said, with a tired little sadness. He was the place I went when I couldn't keep being furniture in your life. That sentence followed me home, even though I did not invite it. The Naperville house sold to a young family with twin boys who ran through the empty rooms shouting about which bedroom would be theirs. I watched them from the driveway and felt something loosen in me that was not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the first inch of release. Houses remember what happened inside them, but they do not belong only to the saddest version of the story. Someone else would put fingerprints on the refrigerator, leave sneakers by the stairs, burn toast on Sunday mornings, and maybe hear the people they loved before silence taught them bad habits. I moved into a smaller townhouse near the Fox River in Geneva, not fancy, not impressive, just quiet enough to make me uncomfortable. For the first month, I woke at 5:30 every morning ready to solve problems nobody had given me. I made coffee, read the paper, walked the river trail, and learned that geese are aggressive little criminals with wings. I called Ethan on Tuesdays and Grace on Sundays. At first, they answered cautiously, like they were approaching a dog that had been hit by a car. Then, slowly, the conversation stopped being about Linda and became about ordinary things. Work, recipes, bad dates. A leaking sink. I actually drove to Milwaukee to fix myself. One evening in October, Grace asked me a question while we were eating takeout noodles at her kitchen table. Dad, do you think Mom loved your money more than she loved you? I had spent months wanting an easy yes. Yes would make me innocent. Yes would make Linda a villain. Yes would turn my grief into a courtroom speech I could win. But my daughter did not need a speech. I said slowly, your mother loved me once, then loved the life we built, then loved the idea of escaping it. And I think I loved being needed more than I loved being known. Grace looked at me for a long time, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That was the first time since retirement that I cried in front of someone without pretending it was allergies. In December, a letter arrived with no return address, postmarked Savannah. I knew Linda's handwriting before I opened it, because some parts of a person remain familiar even after they become strangers. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old photograph. The picture showed us at 27, standing outside our first apartment in Oak Park, broke, smiling, holding a cheap bottle of champagne because I had just landed the sales job that would become everything and ruin almost as much. The note said, Mark, I did love you in that picture. I just didn't know we were both going to spend the next 30 years proving the wrong things. I sat with that note for a long time while snow tapped softly against the townhouse windows. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to frame it. In the end, I placed it in a drawer with the divorce papers, because some truths do not deserve display, but they do deserve to be kept where you can find them when you start lying to yourself. People ask me now whether I regret retiring, and I tell them no, because retirement did not destroy my marriage. It only turned off the machinery loud enough for me to hear that the thing had been broken for years. The money was not the whole betrayal, though it was the part with numbers attached. The affair was not the whole betrayal either, though it was the part with a face. The deepest betrayal was quieter, and maybe it belonged to both of us. She stayed for a life I paid for, and I stayed busy enough not to ask what that life was costing her. Sometimes, when I walk by the river at dusk, I imagine Linda on that porch in Savannah with David Keller, laughing the way she used to laugh before I became a provider instead of a husband. I do not know if she is happy. I do not know if she deserves to be. I only know that 30 years can vanish in one bank alert, one hidden phone, one folder marked after filing, and one sentence written by the woman you thought would grow old beside you. I retired to rest. Instead, I finally woke up.